Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining State of React. I'm so excited to be joined by this amazing panel today. They'll be giving updates and answering your questions. Got to figure out how these new slides work. There we go. Today's event is made possible by this.labs. We're a web consultancy, and we get to work with some pretty amazing clients and have a lot of fun building technology with them. We work across a ton of technologies, especially React. So if you enjoy working across a variety of technology and building some cool products, you should definitely consider coming to work with us. Because we're always hiring, we're always posting about it, and we just love working with people. We also put on a lot of really great events that you should consider coming to. Coming up in the next couple weeks, we have GraphQL Contributor Days, where the GraphQL community will come together and talk about a lot of the amazing features they're building. Vue mentoring will be also the same day, May 3rd, where one of our architects will be joining a group of you all to talk about what things you're looking to learn more about in the Vue ecosystem. On May 18th, we'll have our monthly Women in Tech mentoring, where the community comes together to talk about career and everything that you want to learn about as a woman in tech. The week of May 23, we'll have JavaScript Marathon, which is this amazing event where we do a new training each and every day, starting on the 23rd at, I believe, 9 a.m. Eastern. We will host the first training, and each day we'll have an additional new training topic. It'll be great. We'll learn a lot of new stuff. May 24th, State of Node.js, very similar to today's event, but about the Node ecosystem. And then on May 25th, we'll have Vue Contributor Days. My name is Dustin Goodman, and I'm an engineering manager at this.labs, and I'll be one of your hosts today. And I'm joined by Dane Grant. Dane, you want to introduce yourself real quick? You forgot to unmute.
Dang it. Hello, I'm Dane. I'm a senior engineer at this.labs. I will be your co-host today. Excited to be here.
And we're also joined by this amazing panel, and each of them is going to take a couple seconds to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves and what they're working on, starting with Jen.
Hi, I am Jen Luker. I am a senior staff engineer at Nav Inc. We too are hiring basically every position possible. I am an accessibility advocate and engineering manager and knitter and quilter and mom and all of the things. So, hi, I'm happy to be here. You're next, Romello.
Yeah, my name is Romello Goodman. I am a graphic design educator at MICA, where I teach journey of typography, and I am a senior engineer at Shopify. I work on the Polaris design system team, and probably like everyone here, we are hiring. You want to work with design systems and React and a bunch of cool tooling solutions. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter anywhere.
And there is no relationship between me and Romello, even though we share a last name.
Brother from another mother, I guess. My name is Ben Ilegbodu. As it says there, I'm a front-end architect at Stitch Fix. I'm on our front-end platform team, so the team works on our design system and works on other kind of DevOpsy types things, trying to set everybody else's front-end systems up so they can focus on their future development. And we are hiring as well. So if you were interested in the role that Romello just described, you would also be interested in the role that we are hiring for as well. So no competition, whichever one you're interested in. But yes, lots of great overlap there.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, everyone. I'm Chantastic. Go by Michael or Chan or Chantastic or whatever you want to call me, whatever mix of those things. Up till about a year and a half ago, I was producing an interview show called React Podcast. So you might have heard me and some of the people here on that before. And I am currently working at a company called Chromatic, who are the maintainers of Storybook. And, just like everybody all the time in this space, we're also hiring. So if you want to work on all of the design systems, you can join us.
Oh, what that is an intro. Like you saw me applauding. Hi, I am Kathleen McMahon. I am a senior design systems engineer that is starting at Northwestern Mutual on Monday. So this was my official announcement, like, wow, new job, and let me announce it here. So I'm so excited to be joining the amazing Luna Design Systems team, and that there's a lot of very skilled people there, and there's a big focus on accessibility, which really warms my heart. And I just can't wait to nerd out with my teammates on design systems and talk to them about lighting and crystals and cats and all the other things that come to mind.
And last of all, hi, I'm Mark. I now work at a startup called Replay, and I also do a whole bunch of Redux stuff, including answering questions about React and Redux, basically anywhere there's a comment box on the internet.
I forgot to unmute. We were also going to be joined by Tanner Lindsley today, but unfortunately he came down with a severe cold this morning. So our best wishes to him to get better, because we're going to miss him today. It would have been a fun conversation, but it's going to be a fun conversation without him. So it doesn't really matter, but we wish him well. I hand the mic off to Dane, who's going to ask our first question of the day to kick this thing off.
All right. So I think we have a topic today. React 18 has finally been released. I know it's been quite a long time coming, and it is finally here. So congrats to the React team on getting that released. And now hopefully find out today, like, how does this affect us as React developers? Does anybody have any like first impressions that have worked with React 18 already that they want to like share about the release or anything like that?
It's been anticlimactic. It was very quiet. It just happened. And after the years of build-up, it's been easy to transition for my team. So it's been very quiet, which is slightly disconcerting for me.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I saw someone else comment on Twitter the other day that like, the release happened, and other than the initial announcement, there wasn't a whole lot of fanfare. Like there haven't been tons of blog posts, and I kind of feel that it was a few different things. One is that it did take multiple years for this release to actually get out the door in a lot of ways. So, insert the obligatory suspense joke here. But also, like in some ways, like what was going to be said has been said already, and now it's available.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it's true. Like all of the blog posts that were going to be written on this topic have already been written, and they just needed to be modified or adjusted ever so slightly, kind of in the past couple of months. And I think that I'm really I'm excited to see that it was kind of like a non-event to a degree, because it just means that as a team and a community we're really maturing. And so for big changes like this, you kind of want them to be non-events. And I feel like the fact that it was a non-event is a real testament to how much work and care went into making sure that it was really good and communicated well and had community feedback up front. And I feel like that's really the beauty of what they've done with this release, is just involved all of that communication in a new and exciting and obviously working type of way.
Kind of feel like the biggest win was the working group. That's the thing we learned from the React 18 release, was how well that worked, how easy it was to adjust to React 18 because of the fact that we had so much feedback going into it and the conversations were thoughtful. So non-events are ridiculously awesome, especially for a huge ecosystem. But it's also a little weird coming from, the cycle of, what's this bug? Oh God, I should be a janitor. And oh yes, I am the king of the world cycle.
We actually got a question from the community already, kind of on this topic. So I'm going to go ahead and put it up on screen and share it with the group. But it's some folks seem to think that the anticlimactic release was an indication that people were getting tired of React. Do any of you think that's true or holds water?
I don't think it's tired of React. I think that it's just become more of a standard at this point. So, and again, with the prolonged cycle and conversations of this release, it just, a lot of the community had already been using it. So this was just the official, we put our stamp on it, official version.
Yeah, I think this, oh, sorry. Were you going to talk, Ben? Sorry, I missed you.
Go for it.
Oh, I think something that's really fascinating about this release is I think like the whole last year or so in React is that I think that there's a little bit of a border shift, or like a boundary shift in terms of where React's targeting. And so I think that what's been interesting is that a lot of people now, over the past handful of years, have started their React projects or rewritten their React projects on some type of mature framework. And it feels to me like a lot of what React 18 was targeting is capability for those frameworks. And so for people who are using and utilizing a framework and the power of a framework, they will see some of the capabilities trickle in over time. But I think that, honestly, like this release didn't have kind of the flashy like hooks, like the mechanism with which you are personally writing React changes dramatically. It's just that there's a lot of new capabilities that are really targeting frameworks that I think we'll start to see improve user experiences over time as those frameworks mature and start to include them in different and interesting ways.
The flip side of that is that there are new user-facing APIs, like the use transition hook. And I mean, I've been reading about these for the last couple years and whatnot, but at the same time, I personally have not had a reason to even try them out. Now, part of it is that I'm also very busy, but like these new APIs are kind of obscure. And so they are a user-facing feature, but it's not a thing that I think people immediately understand how to use or why or when you should use them. And so there isn't necessarily a lot of excitement around those yet because it hasn't clicked with people.
I also think it's like, do people even need to use them in their day-to-days, Like, I'm always reminded to like, you can still write component did update and you don't have to use hooks. And it's like very much like the, when Babel first came out and like all the new JavaScript features and like all the new language syntaxes, like everyone's using those, but now there's still things coming out for the most part. I don't use the new ones because like in my day-to-day, I'm like, oh yeah, I have the tools that I need. And like, I think React's getting to that like mature place to where like you can do a lot with it, but you also don't have to like travel outside of like your bag of tricks or like your API if you don't need to.
I agree. The announcement for me, well, a few things. The fact that it felt like a non-event, which is great because that means like there's no bugs or no, oh my God, how do I fix this? But the way that people have been reading about this for a while and responding to it, it's very similar to an accessibility community when you're talking about WCAG, like what support, like what success criteria is going to be coming out soon in like WCAG 2.1, and when you have this working draft versus an official recommendation for a spec, and the same thing with when a new CSS feature is going to be supported, and you're always like looking through, can I use this feature yet? And everything just starts to snowball and become more prevalent and just more excited to like use these new things. Sorry, words are hard right now. I'm still recovering from Miami, but I see this more of as a more mature library now in a way that it can be equated with like new features for browsers or new, specs that are coming out for accessibility needs, if that makes sense. It does make sense to me. So
I also
I think it's sorry, Jen, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in the fact that it is more mature at this point, and a lot of us have already had apps that have been built for potentially years already on React, you kind of get used to the code that you're used to. So it may actually take some new engineers learning React for the first time to bring some of these features to us to remind us that they exist in the first place. So, it's just as much how the master learns from the apprentice as much as the apprentice learns from the master.
Yeah, and to continue on that thought, it's like people jump to the new features when they're like, oh, there's this huge hole that I'm trying to solve and I'm trying to fill, and now, okay, yes, this new hooks feature or this new whatever feature now solves my problem. Whereas I think now a lot of the new things in React 18, they are the problems that library authors have had. And it's like, oh, now I'm going to be able to do this, or I'll be able to do loading indicators better. And in fact, in my design system, the hook I'm most excited about is the UseID hook, which is like the most simplest of hooks, but being able to automatically generate a unique ID that's consistent across server rendering and client-side rendering, so that for accessibility purposes mainly, I can associate an input tag with a label, or I can associate a described by with a content ID. And like all that stuff now can be pushed into the design system instead of having to require people to actually pass those IDs in. But that's like an implementation detail that's behind the scenes in the library. So I think a lot of the things, like everybody said, the library authors are going to make the most use of it. And then we, as those consuming those libraries, will be able to, see those benefits, or the library will be lighter weight because they don't have to create these things themselves. That sort of situation.
That's such a great call out, Ben, because I think about the suspense features that were released, yep. But UseID, like I almost cursed. I don't know if that's all right on this show, but I'm very excited about it because it's something that we've wanted for a really long time, and I feel like it's been like on the cusp for like years, and we're like, when is this thing coming? Because like I need this like every day of my life, like especially for accessibility stuff, and it's so exciting to see that, and I'm so like, who else is glad that it got the simpler name instead of what was it before, like use
ID.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for the human memorable name that they landed on, even if it's not as technically descriptive.
Right.
So Jen, you mentioned before, credited the working group as being a part of why it was such a smooth release, React 18. And I'm curious, I think Chantastic, you were a part of the working group. Is this something that continues on now that React 18 is here? And if so, like what sort of things are you focusing on at this point?
That's a really good question. It's been pretty quiet in there, and Mark can talk to this as well. But I know that there was like a really big push for this release and a lot of attention put on this release. I know that in some of the early discussions, when they were trying to figure out what it was that they wanted to do for this group, there was this kind of idea of having it be for this release, right? And it might not continue on in perpetuity. Some of the same players might be like recomposed into the next group, but the idea is not that it's like a static group of people. And honestly, even during the time there, we saw a lot of people come in, get added as conversations were being had, and so I think the future is kind of undetermined. But I do think it was a really cool thing that they did. And I think that they've definitely proved a model or playlist for how to do that in the future. Whether or not it's the same people and the same format is up for discussion. But I do think that it was successful enough that something similar will continue in the future for, at least big major releases like this.
And
do you have any
has
thoughts on that, Mark?
continued.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it was hugely valuable. I mean, what the React team was trying to accomplish was a couple of different things. They wanted to have active community feedback and input but they also wanted to avoid having thousands of people commenting on the same issues and just turning everything into chaos. So, how do you balance getting valuable feedback with, trying to keep it at a manageable on-topic level? And I feel like they found a pretty good balance. It was kind of a hand-picked group of, prominent community people, but they did make it a point to add more people, based on, suggestions and stuff over time. And some of the people who were added later on had some very, very helpful contributions. Like Michael said, at this point, the group it's kind of done. Like, there's a very occasional chatter at this point, but the purpose has been concluded. But the whole thing was incredibly valuable and definitely helped shape a lot of things that turned out, especially some things that we ended up needing in React Redux.
So the model itself has continued. There's a working group for the new architecture for React Native as well. So they have taken that model and continued down that path. It was valuable enough that it's good to see it continuing in one form or fashion.
So I was technically in the working group, although I never said a thing. I was just a fly on the wall, it turns out. But looking at it from, somebody who was just observing it, I think what also helped with the working group was the library authors, again, being able to ask questions like, I don't understand this about this in the alpha or when it was earlier stage, so that all of those things could be resolved and built in so that, for instance, React Redux could be 18 supported right when it came out. So I think going back again to the non-event status is like, what makes things the event is like, oh, I want to upgrade to React 18, but oh, this library that I really used doesn't support it. And then now I can't use it until 3 months from now when they finally, get on board. But because a lot of those prominent libraries had already taken the time, because they had already been in the working group, things like Next, React Redux, like everything, basically, they were already prepared and stuff, and were able to give great feedback to the React team.
The biggest issue that I've seen happening so far is not actually with a library per se, but actually with the React TypeScript types. So React itself is not written in TypeScript. It's actually written using the Flow language syntax. And the TypeScript types for the React library have always been maintained by the community. And the people who do that don't get nearly enough credit, by the way. It's basically just a handful of people doing this work, again, in their free time. But because React 18 was coming out, they took this opportunity to do a very long overdue cleanup of the type definitions. And one of the things they did was removing the implicit definition of a children prop on every function component by default when you use one of those types. And that was right, because the types weren't reflecting how components were necessarily being used, but that caused some problems. And in addition, because of how definitely typed publishes those type definitions, if you end up with two different major versions of the type defs in the same project, it causes a bunch of compilation errors. And I believe the suggested fix is to tell your package manager to ensure that there's only one version of those included.
Definitely ran into that. For sure.
So we've brought up a couple things so far, like UseID and use transition, and the thing about React 18 being more towards libraries and stuff like that has come up a few times. I'm curious, like, what are the things like UseID, for example, the new APIs that people, just working on regular apps at this point can really benefit from using and learning?
I think there's a handful of of ones that you need to know to make the migration, or you may need to know in order to make the migration. I think a lot of installations might just kind of like work out of the box, but there are a handful of ones that you need to know. I think so. There's a new root API, and that's responsible for letting you be able to install React 18, but run in kind of like the previous React 17 renderer style. So there's like a new API, a new root API, and a legacy root API, and you can kind of use both of those. The goal is to get to the new root API. So that's kind of a big one. And then some of the things that I'm looking at a list right now. So some of the things that APIs that you need to know in order to get kind of compatibility with the legacy root API is so there's one called there used to be an API called unstable batched updates, and so you can kind of get around that with, I think there's a new API called React DOM.flush sync, which allows you to like I don't know. I don't know the technical parts of it, but I know that it allows you to basically like render stuff like right away and then do stuff in between. I don't know. I'm not super technical on that side of things. But I think those are kind of the two big ones in terms of like things that you might actually need to know in order to just upgrade your app. But then I know there's a handful of other ones for libraries as well.
Mark, when you were updating React Redux, were there any of those new hooks in particular you found helpful?
Yes, there's the main one that we care about is something called Use Sync External Store. Would this be a good time to do the slides thing?
Sure, why not? Let's do it.
Okay. I got some slides. I'll try and go fast just so I'm not monopolizing the conversation here. So let's see. First, personal life update. As of a month ago, I have a new job. I'm now working in a company called Replay, where we're building a time-traveling debugger for JavaScript applications. It is honestly life-changing in terms of how useful it is. Yes, I'm biased, but it's really that cool. Also, for the first time in my career, I'm getting to build an open source app as part of my day job. So like if you literally want to see what I'm working on a daily basis, like you totally can do that. I've been keeping like running narratives in our Discord, and you can watch all the PRs that I file. So big thing for us, we put out React Redux version 8. 3 major changes. It is compatible with React 18. The code base itself is now in TypeScript, and we removed some rarely used legacy options. It works with React 16, 17, and 18 out of the box. And in theory, the upgrade process should just be bump the package version, and it, fingers crossed, ought to just work. And we've also updated our templates for Create React app as well. A few details on those changes. We converted the code base to TypeScript last year. We got a whole bunch of help from the community, and then I went through and did some additional cleanup after that. We also removed a couple very rarely used options and APIs. In most cases, that's irrelevant for you because people weren't using them. So the big thing, and this is what brought up this topic, is the React 18 compatibility. And there's a whole bunch of backstory on this, but the key point is that React 18 has a new hook called Use Sync External Store, and it manages the process of subscribing to a data source like a Redux store and ensuring that you don't see inconsistencies in the UI when you're using React's concurrent rendering features. And the React team actually had some very different plans for this, and they ended up changing what those plans were after discussion with the working group. And they ended up designing this new hook specifically for the use cases that React Redux needed, on the grounds that if it works great for React Redux, it'll work good for everybody else as well. So the hook only exists in React 18, but they also published a compatibility shim package that lets you use it with older versions of React as well. So we shipped using that compatibility shim by default, so it works with all versions of React that have hooks. If you want to drop the few hundred bytes from the bundle size, there's an alternate entry point that we shipped that you can alias in your bundler instead. A couple other updates on the Redux toolkit side. we have a new side effects middleware called Listeners. It's kind of similar to Thunks Sagas or Observables, but it has a simpler API and a smaller bundle size. And so we would actually recommend using this in preference to Sagas or Observables in most apps. And we've had some folks talk about how they've migrated their code already, and it's much simpler and easier to understand. It does let you do some very nifty long-running async workflow type things, like waiting for specific dispatched actions, running these little like additional sub-processes in your logic. So you can do some very powerful, complex async workflows with these tools. So overall, today we recommend that if you're trying to do data fetching, use our RTK query data fetching API as the first choice. Don't use Sagas or Observables for data fetching. If you want to respond to things happening in the app, use the Listeners. And if you just need to have some logic that has access to dispatch and get state, then write some basic thunks by hand. And the other big thing that happened is a week ago, I officially marked the original createstore API as deprecated. And this is really an attempt to help people who are trying to learn Redux today. There's a lot of boot camps and online courses that are still teaching very old Redux patterns. And what I found is that most learners never even go and look at our docs. So they don't know that Redux Toolkit exists, and they're going to end up using patterns that are a lot harder to learn from. So what I did was I marked it as deprecated, and this is really just a visual-only warning. It does not affect how the code runs at all, but the goal is that new learners would see that, wonder, why is this crossed out? Hover over it, see the recommendation, and hopefully go look at the docs and learn that Redux Toolkit even exists. If you don't like that, don't worry, your code's not going to break. We're not actually removing createstore. You can import a new alias function if you want that doesn't have the strike through. The response to this was interesting. Library maintainers thought it was a great idea. Some power users kind of got angry at us, but we made this decision because we feel it's in the best interest of the majority of our users, especially those learning Redux. Down the road, we're hoping to add some new RTK query stuff, including maybe some suspense-related support in the not-too-distant future. We'll have to see how that turns out. So.
Very cool. I'm wondering, is it advisable for people to just start upgrading their apps to React 18 right away? Do you think there's a time period that you should kind of wait it out and make sure different libraries and stuff that you're using have compatibility? What's the story on that, you think?
So I gave a talk at React Miami, and my talk at React Miami was around Enzyme and React testing library. So there are definitely lots of apps, including apps at Stitch Fix, that are still using Enzyme for testing. And the problem is that Enzyme technically doesn't support 17, and it definitely does not support React 18. So if you've used Enzyme before, there's an adapter that you use so that it can work with different versions of React. And Enzyme never created a React 17 adapter, but the community created one, an unofficial one that seemed to work just fine with React 17. But because of how React 18 was rewritten, an adapter won't get created, and it would take like a whole team to do it. So if you're trying to upgrade from React 17 to 18, you're going to be in a situation where none of your tests will pass, or they'll all fail if you're using Enzyme. And that puts you in a situation that you're going to have to rewrite your test into React testing library. And, you know, React testing library has a different paradigm for how you write tests. So, you know, it's not just let's just swap it out and search and replace sort of deal. So that can be something that folks will run into for sure if they're moving on to React 18. So my talk specifically was about things we did in Enzyme and things and how they're done in React testing library and what that migration might look like there. So that'll be a gotcha if someone hasn't already realized that.
Yeah, that's a super important call out for sure.
Yeah. But most people, a lot of people are already on React testing library for other reasons, because they prefer the experience and developer experience. So, but for those who are still on Enzyme, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, like obviously, like the deeper your stack is, the more potential challenges you're going to have. In terms of like React itself, I think that they've done such a really good job of making sure that you can, like one of the coolest things in my mind is that you could, with this like a gradual adoption strategy that they have, the fact that they shipped both root APIs, in terms of shipping React 18 to production, you can actually kind of just put a conditional in your app and like render with the create root for like the new root API for like a beta or small subset of customers, and then render with the legacy root API for all of your existing customers or users. So there's a lot of like really cool stuff that you can do with this release that you haven't been able to do before, in gradually sending that out to users using whatever kind of feature flagging tool that you use, and that is pretty cool. You don't have to, it's not like an on and off. You can kind of gradiate it over time.
Awesome. I was looking when I first read the upgrade stuff, and it looks like even if you're not doing a bunch of the new suspense and server rendering stuff, that you also get some sort of just improvements out of the box by using React 18, like the automatic batching and stuff like that. I don't know if there's any other like gains that you might not see from upgrading, but might be helping to improve your apps.
Yeah, that's like the example of not having to change any code, but getting some benefits out of it. So like automatic batching, hopefully you weren't relying on it not being batched before. Otherwise that might actually cause a bug in your code. But that plus, just performance improvements inside of React itself. You'll get just from, like Michael's saying, making the transition over to 18 without having to change any code. And then, you can start finding areas where something like start transition could be a help to you, where before maybe your UI was laggy because of something you're doing, you're calling things too many times, and then you can go in and make optimizations using that. And again, a gradual adoption to try to improve the performance of your app based upon places where you see problems and such. So like we've been talking before, it wasn't this case where all of a sudden you need to rewrite your app or whole sections of your app to make it React 18 compatible. It's more like, how can I improve my app now using new features that have come out? Just like, how can I make my code cleaner by using the spread operator or something like that, or nullish coalescing or any of those new features that have come out in JavaScript. So
yeah, I mean, upgrade for UseID, right? Like it's worth it.
Yep, that too. Although I don't know from a application standpoint if that's something that folks have run into, but definitely from a design system standpoint for sure.
I was about to say, I've run into that exact problem building my own design system with React components and then like pulling it into the main library. It's like always UseID was something I was like, oh, I'll just go pull it in from this third party, or I'll go build my own hook.
Yeah, that's the one piece of Lodash that I've not been able to relinquish yet. It's like all my projects have like, it's just React and then like Lodash / what is it, ID or get ID or whatever the API is. There are a handful of gotchas on the upgrading. So Ben, that was a really good reminder. So like you can upgrade, and one of the biggest like kind of heuristic shifts is that automatic batching for state updates. And there can be a couple of gotchas if you were kind of inadvertently or indirectly depending on that state not being batched. And so that is where that flush React DOM flush sync API comes in. I actually have a free AKED course that kind of guides you through the migration path of like all of these like new APIs, how you actually migrate, how you could do a stage rollout, etc. If it's valuable to people, there's a quick link at chan.dev/react18, and that'll take you to the AKED course. I think it's like, I don't know, 15 minutes and 11 lessons or something. And it's a real quick run through of like when you're going to need to flush updates to fix some of those expectations that you might have had on the old heuristics.
So I think we may be like, a few months out from folks like, okay, I've now updated my app to React 18. Here are all of the gotchas that I ran into. Here are the different things. Like, here's when you want to use this hook, like in the real world, as opposed to this is just a hook that does something. But like, you got some existing code. How would you leverage 18 from a real world standpoint? We're probably a couple of months away from that.
Yeah.
Once some of us continue to migrate our apps over and such. So I think that's where we're going to get a lot of the content, since suspense and all of those other features have already been talked about ad nauseum.
So Chan kind of made a cool point, and we kind of talked about it earlier during the conversation regarding kind of all the content's already been kind of made, so to speak. Like, we've talked about it, but a lot of you are content creators in your own right and maintain blogs, present at React Miami. By the way, actually, before I get into this question, how was React Miami for those that went? Like, first in-person conference in what feels like 3 years now? Like, what was that like? What was it like seeing people, but also what was it like getting to like hang out with all the React community and actually talk about like React things?
Warm, fun, awesome, tiring, weird.
It's a good summary.
Define weird, or is that not stream appropriate? I don't know.
No, well, just the 2 years since 2+ years since I've seen people in person basically at all.
And then if I remember correctly, Kathleen, you and Ben both gave talks. Ben's mentioned it, but you gave one too, right?
I did. So I did a talk about rolling out a rebrand in secret using feature flags. So it was talking about the story. So prior to my new role at Starting, I took a 3-month off to recover from burnout. And prior to that, I was working at LaunchDarkly and learning all these amazing things about feature flags passed to like the whole fancy if statements, because that's all I knew before I joined. And then I learned all the magic of like all the other things you could do. And we ended up rolling out a rebrand, well, in secret to the customers, but also to most of the company, which was amazing. And it was just nice to talk about that and be on stage, which is exciting, also frightening, because it's like, oh my God, people after 2 years. Oh my God, people after 2 years. So it's like so many people. So, and it was like we were in little groups and it was very spacious, but we're also in part of this convention center. So there was another convention going on, and I didn't get up early enough to see Serena Williams was in the other conference, like the exhibit area, and I missed it. But yeah, there was like small crowds and little crowds, and like times when you're like, it's too crowded, I need my mask. And it's just amazing to talk to everyone in the community and just talk to people about React again in person. It's just more vibrant. But yeah, it was lovely. I have no words. And also, I loved Ben's talk, by the way. Ben's talk was amazing. There were certain things he talked about testing where I'm like, oh, I wish I knew that before. It's like, this is the best command. This is the second best command. This is the third best command. I'm like, amazing. So good. So he's one of my favorite talks of the whole event. Thank you. Talk more about this.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, React Miami. It was at the Miami Convention Center, which is like 4 blocks maybe from the beach. So, of all the places where you're going to try to bring back, in-person conferences for React, having it in Miami was pretty awesome. I would say, and like Mark said, it was hot. Just walking around, it was probably high 70s, mid 80s, but humid. So, put those two together, and yeah, it's a hot day. But just having the hallway track and being able to talk to people, like I ended up missing like half the talks just because I was talking to people outside, and it's like I'm trying to get inside, but I keep finding people I haven't talked to in person for 2.5 years and didn't make it into the talk. But yeah, it was a great atmosphere. Yeah, just great to see people, great to hear people, see people learning and stuff like that. Hopefully we can have more and more of them from now on.
The talks will be online. The real conference is the hallway track.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless they did one of those track days where they don't actually record all the sessions, and then you're just disappointed because if you can't go to 2 at the same time. Anyway, that's super exciting though. I'm sure we're all ready to go back to some of these in-person events, and I hope React Miami is the first of many this year.
I do know that what is it? Remix Conf is happening in Salt Lake.
Yep.
Next
In fact,
month?
we are sponsoring that event.
Is that right?
The 20th.
Yeah, that is correct.
24th.
This month. Or yeah, next month, May, right?
Yeah, May 24th and 25th, I think.
Yeah. So
that's month from 2 days ago in Salt Lake City.
Yep. And Reactathon is next week.
Yep. That's right. In San Francisco.
I'm jealous.
Stuff is happening.
Talking about conferences by the beach, I got to put this out into the universe. The best conference format I think that has ever existed is the JS Conf US conference format, where they have a day of talks, and then in the middle they just have like a beach hangout, like choose your own adventure, a bunch of excursions planned, or whatever, and then they have a day of talks the next day. So it's like a 3-day conference, but there's just there's this hallway track, like literally in the middle, and you just go and adventure with people, and find good food and just hang out at the pool or the beach. It's brilliant, and I'm so sad that they don't do that conference anymore, because it was my favorite one to go to of all of them, because it was they figured out the formula.
Not only that, but they also had childcare.
Yes.
So I got to take my kid on vacation. And it was
great.
fun.
It's great.
There's also Render ATL that's coming up soon.
Yes, June 1 through 4.
Yeah.
So many great events. Recommend going to all of them if you can make it. Best way to go is to speak. That's what I always say.
I'm speaking at React Finland in September.
Congratulations.
Very cool.
By the way, JS Conf Hawaii, which I spoke at in 2020, right before, like a month before the shutdown, had the same format you're talking about, Chan. So
I love it.
Was,
I love it.
Day of talks.
It's
Go
Hawaii.
snorkeling, then day of talks.
Yeah, beach day.
Yeah.
So speaking about all these amazing conferences, I'm going to go back to my original question, which was around the content about React 18. Just keep us back on topic and on track. We can talk about conferences all day. But have any of you been working on some like new React 18 related content? Have talked to anybody who is really excited about launching some new courses or some new content? Or do we feel like, as we mentioned earlier, it's just all out there?
I don't have anything yet. A lot of my content is like, war stories from being in the midst of it and not being able to solve something or find it on Stack Overflow. So once I run into those, then I'll blog about those and such. But I think thinking about it now, what also impacted the content is the working group as well. There was a lot of content in the GitHub repo that was explaining concepts and explaining what each one of the features were and stuff like that. So usually that stuff is never there in the official documentation, and other people have to write about them, but having it, there written by the, authors and stuff kind of took away some of the early content to explain things as well that I found, which was good because it explained it for people right off the bat. But
they also developed a new documentation site, which was far clearer than anything we've had before as well.
Yep.
Dane and I were part of that effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I have one complaint right now, it's that the beta docs site is still basically hidden. There's not even like a "we have beta docs, please try them" bar at the top of the main docs site. And I know Dan has been doing some work on trying to fill out the remaining content, but at this point it feels like it's going to take months for that to get done. And the new docs, like the tutorials, are so much better than what's been on the existing legacy doc site for years. Like what's there right now would be far better for people to start with. And I've basically been begging them, like, highlight the new doc site. Like, sure, slap the beta label on it, but please put this front and center for people.
I think last time I checked, it said that the content was like 70% complete now, which is a lot. So there's already like a ton of good content on there. Yeah. So I'm also really excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's it's as good a time as ever to learn the basics of React. I think that you see a new version of React and all this flashy stuff, but I think if you kind of like listen to the group of people on this panel and you're wondering like where to start, what you need to learn to like get ahead, I think React is just at a mature place right now where like just getting good with the basics, like understanding the various patterns and how to use them and interact with libraries. And then also like so much more is going into frameworks and kind of getting a sense of like where React, your React education should end. And then you should start investing into frameworks. Like I think that really like part of the reason that React feels boring right now, I'm overstating, kind of like what we're saying for effect. But the reason that it feels boring or like this huge thing that we've been working towards for the last 3 years as a non-event is because the industry has moved towards frameworks, right? There's a lot of excitement around the new breed of frameworks. Like, Next has constantly been leading that charge in the React space specifically. But, we have Remix, which is like really interesting. We have Redwood, which is just this like full stack kind of like Rails top to bottom framework. We have, there's been a lot of insights that we've been gaining from the SvelteKit world. So there's a lot of cool things happening in framework, and I think that line of like where you should start learning is just going up. And I think that there are plenty of resources out there for how to become a proficient developer in the React Vue library. But really, like, we're working at a level higher than that now. That was kind of, caring a whole lot about the various APIs that made it into a release is kind of like a handful of years ago. And now we're kind of into that framework space, kind of like, where PHP and, Ruby went into, Laravel and, Drupal and Rails. I think we're at that point in this kind of like front end, adventure that we're on.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of like the I forget the conference, I think it was React Conf, the meta language talk that was given, to where like React is really more like in the background. Like, at least for myself, I can speak. My team works a lot of design systems, so we think in React because that's like the primary package or primarily we package our components. But a lot of the way I think about React sometimes would be like, what props should we have? How much ergonomics should like the developer experience be? And it's less about like the internals or knowing React and more thinking about like how people will use it. And I feel as though like, yeah, it's just gotten to the point where it's more of a platform. People are like, okay, I'm going to interact with React in this way or that way. And like, maybe I don't need all these tools, or just the way that they're thinking about it is less like even about making UIs. And it's a really like an abstracted way of like, how can I think about the state of React and like managing state in React and not even worrying about anything.
If I can go off on one of my favorite little hobby horses for a minute. So one of the great strengths of the React ecosystem is that React is very unopinionated, and that the community has come up with tons of tools for solving different problems. One of the great weaknesses of the React ecosystem is that you now have to go make choices in dozens of different categories between hundreds of different tools and libraries. State management, styling, build tools, these are, I see dozens of questions being asked every day in React to Flux and Stack Overflow and Reddit, like, what tool should I use for problem space? And because React itself is just the view, the React team has deliberately not given recommendations for most of these things, and yet real world React developers are dealing with these libraries and tools to build actual applications on a daily basis. And there is a distinct lack of guidance for understanding what these tools do and when you should even consider using any of them. So a year ago, I actually got kind of fed up with this problem, and I put up a placeholder repository that I dubbed the React Community Tools and Patterns library or site. And the idea was, I want this to be a community written guidance that describes certain problem areas like state management, styling, build tools, a bunch of other stuff. For each of those categories says, here's what the problem space is. Here are the most common tools that React devs use to solve these problems. For each tool, here's what it does. Here's when you might want to consider using it. Here's when you should consider not using it. Not comparing these tools and like saying one is better than the other, but just describing the purpose and the benefits and the trade-offs. And ideally, I would like these to be written by the experts on those tools themselves. Unfortunately, I've been really busy with Redux stuff, and I don't have enough time to write all the content for this anyway. But I really still want this to become an actual real resource that the community puts together and that people can go to as kind of like the authoritative guidance on what tools exist. There has been a little bit of movement recently, a couple people starting to work on some content, but really what we need is like people jumping in on this and actually making it a thing and filling it out.
Mark, we need to talk. So my team put out framework.dev recently.
Yep, I saw that, and there's some overlap, yeah.
I was going to say, I think we're both trying to solve the exact same problem space, because what we also did is we introduced all the libraries just to kind of show, hey, here is literally everything, but one of the features we added was a comparison tool, specifically to show which two libraries, when you put them head to head, are actively being utilized, maintained, and kind of helping that decision point. Maybe there's a little bit more we could be doing, and we can combine our two efforts. So I'm glad we talked about this today. But I'm shamelessly plugging our little tool as well, because we built that. Mark, you want to share the link with me so I can post it to the community though for what you've been working on?
Yeah, let me go pull that up over here.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's interesting. I mean, while you're pulling that up, I think it's interesting that a lot of us here represent design systems, component libraries, for building applications. Developer productivity. Like, it's interesting because I think that Brad Frost has this really great language around like front of the front end and back of the front end, and how our space is developing, and we're seeing it kind of unfold in real time. And I think that something that's interesting is that you're getting a perspective. I think a lot. know, this is a broad overgeneralization, but I think a lot of people who are excited about React as a tool for building components have kind of, a lot of us have gravitated into the developer productivity / like design system space because we like React for describing UI. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like there is still a lot of, like, if you consider this divide, there's a lot of people who are in that front end kind of space, and we really think about React, are really excited about UseID and building these types of things. And we see this at Chromatic with Storybook as well. But then there's also this other side where it's like, I feel like that's where like the frameworks are targeting right now, where it's like, we want to be productive building applications with React and don't necessarily care about like all of the like specific APIs that got released. Like the framework's going to take care of that for us. And we are like kind of putting things together, connecting them to backends, doing all that kind of work, actually feature building and kind of application productivity on like that scale. So it is kind of interesting, like as we mature, to see like pretty clear like divides. And I feel like, I don't know, I definitely identify on that like design systems kind of, component, knowing React inside and out kind of side. But it is cool to see that divergence there.
Yeah, it's like, do I want to build a text field with the label, associate them with UID, use transition so that when I search and type that I get the autocomplete to show up and have that highlight when I move my keyboard down? Or do I just want to use Shopify's component and and then be done with it and that just put that on the page, right? So that's the developer experience we're creating. So yes, I'm using React 18, but through something else that's actually building it for all of us, right? So I think that's kind of where things are going. I'm still benefiting from React 18, but indirectly, and I didn't have to learn more esoteric hooks. All I have to know really is use state and use effect, and then kind of to manage my actual app state, but then everything else is React query, some component library, et cetera, GraphQL, that sort of thing, Apollo.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but the metaphor of like it's becoming like the browser, like there's always CSS and JS features being added in, but it's like I don't need those. But the moment I like research, it's like, oh, okay, a new tool, and like I understand I can like the environment that I'm working in has changed, and there's something new I can pick or integrate, and like that feels very powerful to like always be able to like learn, but don't feel like you have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great call out. Yep.
Well, did anybody have anything else they were looking to share today? We've answered most of the community's questions. I think there's one, but I think I'm going to suggest that we take it to Twitter. A little too technical for this panel, or at least for the intent of this panel. I'm sure you can all answer it. But is there anything else y'all wanted to kind of plug in, share React 18 related, or anything just React ecosystem related? Crickets, Bueller?
Nothing's coming to mind at the moment. Thinking though.
I'm thrilled I'm not the only one who's mentioned accessibility in this panel. So that has been quite thrilling for me. It's becoming more out in the public. Pay attention, it's important.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick on that. I was gonna add, oh, sorry, Chan, you were about to go.
Oh, I was just gonna drop some just like kind of like barf for a little bit, but like, yeah, I think that if you're interested in kind of like the migration strategy for React 18, again, I have a tiny little mini course on it, chan.dev/React18. That'll get you up to speed on the APIs you need to know in order to kind of confidently go into React. As Ben said, there are some ecosystem things that you need to consider. So if you use Enzyme, like this might be a difficult transition time for you, more so than if you are using fewer libraries. I think kind of on that topic of like design systems and and accessibility and whatnot, something that I have found really cool, Redwood.js has really they hit 1.0 a couple weeks ago, and they've done a really cool job of building a framework that's really well integrated. And I think that even if you're not, this is more React than React 18 related, but like even if you're kind of not using a framework yet, there's something really interesting about just downloading Redwood, going through the demo and seeing the developer experience that they're proposing, because it is so beautifully integrated. Their ideas for testing UI inside of Storybook and breaking out various states for asynchronous UI are really brilliant. Their cell model is super cool. Big fan of that. They have like accessibility testing in Storybook, like built right out of the box for components generated through their builders. Just really, really cool stuff. Like I'm really excited to see that level of developer experience advancement happening. So I mean, just a huge shout out to the Redwood team. Even if you're not in the market for a framework, especially an opinionated one, looking at that to see like all of the decisions that they made to provide a great developer experience and have continuity from front of the front end to back of the front end is just really worth checking out, in my opinion.
I know one of my architects loves Redwood, so
it's
can't
cool.
speak highly enough of it. I'm also a Rails guy, and so Redwood speaks to me.
It definitely borrows some of that love there for sure.
Yeah, I kind of always like the freedom with React of just being able to pick and choose, what you want to use, how you build up your stuff. But I do see stuff like that. Like sometimes I'll see all this stuff that Laravel's doing, and I'm like, man, that seems amazing. But you'd have to write PHP to use it. So it's cool to see some new stuff in JavaScript kind of taking it to that sort of place.
I'm going to jump backwards for a moment, if that's all right, and pick on something Jen said, because I think it is key. We are all talking about accessibility a lot more, and I want to ask if anybody's actively working on anything directly impactful to the React community for accessibility, or is there anything in React 18 we should be aware of that'll help us develop more accessible applications?
UseID.
Let's use it.
Yeah, all of the components I'm working on accessibility-wise are internal to Stitch Fix, so only if you come and work for us will you be able to make use of that accessibility features. So.
I have an entire talk focused on why we should make our internal tools accessible in addition to our external website accessible. It's a little bit of me standing on a soapbox for 20 minutes, but
I'll come listen to that.
It's important. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but when component libraries, the public ones, do build in accessibility, then it makes all the apps more accessible. I wouldn't say it makes them 100% because there's still stuff that you have to do yourself with tab orders and things like that. But yeah, it just raises up the bar of accessibility if the design system itself is so.
If the design systems and the code snippets and documentation include the accessibility features built in, then it does make it easier. We still need to be cognizant of how we're composing these components, because we can make things inaccessible very quickly, even though the individual components themselves are accessible. So you still need to test it, still need to look at it, still need to walk through it, because you can make something that's 100% unusable and also have a 100% lighthouse score. So
that's what those patterns are about. It's like you could, show in those patterns of how to use the accessible components in an accessible way.
Correct. But again, just learn semantic HTML. That'll get you most of the way.
No more divs as buttons, people. We're past that.
Let's not start the link button to discussion.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to open a can of worms
It's
with
like,
that
here we
comment.
go.
That would be a good debate episode if you ever do that. Get someone from what is it, React Aria or something like that, where everything is not semantic HTML, and then someone who loves semantic HTML. It'd be an interesting discussion. I've learned a lot from seeing tweets and research that's happened on that side. I definitely think it's, I don't want to take that project on, so I just use Button.
I will throw it out there for the community that with the beta docs, when we were working with Rachel to develop some of the components that have been used, one of the key things that Rachel Neighbors pushed us on every single time we had a conversation was, is that accessible? It was the number one topic at the head of every conversation. So the new beta docs definitely take that into consideration.
Yes, they do.
So we hope you enjoy that and take a couple notes out of the idea that your meeting should start with the question of, well, is it accessible?
I have a tweet that's quite old, and it says that if your purchasing flow was broken, that someone couldn't get all the way through and complete a purchase, you'd be hotfixing that so fast that heads would spin. Why then is it okay for someone who has a disability to not be able to get through your purchase flow? What's the difference? Accessibility features are not features, they're bugs.
That's a great way to close this one out. Couldn't agree with that more. I think the silence was a perfect, we agree with Jen. That is not a soapbox, Jen. I think you're preaching to the choir.
Thank goodness. Finally, there's a choir.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. This has been an amazing group, amazing panel. We love having you all. We love everything you do for the community, all the content, all the conversations. And as always, the conversation doesn't end here. It just started here. So we hope to see you all on Twitter. I think all of our Twitter handles are on screen. I maybe just made them too small, so I'll put us all back on screen. Accessibility bug, I guess. Maybe not. Just a weird UI. But come have a conversation with us on Twitter. We'd love to talk about accessibility, React 18, and all the amazing things that we're doing in the community, even more. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.